Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's summit. This session is for the founders and CEOs out there who are scaling their businesses, looking toward the future, and thinking, how do I successfully attract, build, and support a winning team that'll help me position my business for success? How do we go from 5 employees to 50 employees to 500 and beyond? The main questions that we're going to be tackling today are, what should leaders of high growth companies do to best support their leadership teams as they scale their businesses? And how can they preemptively prepare for and solve some of the most common talent growing pains? Here today to help us unpack these meaty topics, we have Karina Sobieski, who's the Director of Human Capital for Advent International, where she focuses on human capital management across portfolio companies. Her previous roles include partner in the human capital practice at SoftBank and HR partner at Andreessen Horowitz. We are also thrilled and very blessed to call her one of our Endeavor mentors. Also with us is Endeavor entrepreneur Antonio Ortiz, the CEO and co-founder of Connect Assistance. Antonio's company is dedicated to providing user-centric technology and innovation to change the industry of providing assistance services on highways. Connect has grown to more than 260 employees with operations in Puerto Rico, Panama, and Costa Rica. We are very thrilled to have you both joining us today.
Thank you.
I want to kick it off a little bit around talent issues when it relates to taking a business from startup to scale up. Speaking from your own experience, both from working with different portfolio companies or starting your own business, what are some of the critical talent issues executive teams face as their business strategy shifts from startup to the scale-up phase? Karina, I would love to start with you.
Absolutely. I think it starts with at the beginning, there is the excitement around the business. You have an idea, you start talking to your friends and family, and you do everything to validate your concept and proof of concept, product, market fit. And the focus is that, everybody that you're hiring are taking different hats, having different hats and taking different type of roles. And I think the key at that stage when you have 5, 10, growing to 15 employees is to really going broad, but also deeper and really keeping the focus. Many people think that there is a one playbook that fits it all, that there is no one playbook because you're at a different stage, you have different product fits, you have different market, you have different potential customers, and you're growing very, very differently. So it is good to have this mindset of what's the foundation of the organization and how I think about this from the engineering capital, from the product capital, from the support capital, and not necessarily going to the places of like you are one person that is responsible for one necessary thing, but thinking of what are the strengths of the people that I am surrounding myself with and what are the weaknesses and how I should be complementing the team that I want to build that are going to help me with feeling this proof of concept and product and market fit. And then once you start signing the first set of initial customers, once you have that product market fit, you should start thinking about organization design and really thinking of, okay, what are the teams that I need to start building, and thinking not only that my friends and family that are going to take these positions, but how I'm going to hire people that are experience something that I need, that are more focused on the specific areas, whether that's engineering, whether that's product, whether that's customer success, whether that's sales, whether that's marketing, whether that's recruiting, to prepare this foundation for recruiting at scale, to support the growth that you're going to experience as, again, like based of the validation of your market product fit and the scale of your customer base. And then with the time, you start increasing sophistication of all these functions, sophistication of your engineering, of your product. You start bringing people who are doing HR and operations and recruiting, and building around this, core topics. So back with the biggest learn is that don't be afraid of of having at the beginning people doing many different roles. But once you start seeing this product market fit and scale, start thinking what are the foundations and what type of people do I need to execute against milestones that you're putting in front of yourself. The one important thing to remember is that through this process, you need to think about the culture that you're building, how you communicate with people, how you communicate the vision, how do you celebrate the wins, how do you give ongoing feedback. So you're building the culture around excitement of the people, but at the same time, building again the foundation to build strong culture that later on you're able to attract very good talent that is not your friends and they're not family and they're not coming through direct referrals.
That's great. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into culture because it's such an important topic and it's one that comes up with us in our companies all the time. One quick question, a follow-up there, and then I want to hear from Antonio too. When you think about some of the critical challenges, or what are the biggest problems or mistakes, I guess you can say, that early stage companies make when it comes to people? Like, what are the biggest pieces where you say, I need this company to think early on that this is going to be one of the challenges that they face in the future? What are those big themes or big issues that you see happening?
Yeah, a few. Number one is you hire just to hire, and you're not doing good enough job with hiring because you know that you need people very, very quickly, and you're not evaluating them. You're not doing references check. You just rely on one source. Number two, you're not giving clarity to people. What are their responsibilities? So they think that they know that they're doing some specific work, but you're not communicating clearly. It starts happening that two people that are not communicating doing the same work from completely two different perspectives. So this clarity around high-level goals and how this cascades down through the organization, and then alignment and focus, I think it is key, which connects with the fact that people don't give feedback because they're afraid. Like either you have first-time managers or first-time CEOs that they have people who joined for this first-time vision, so they don't want to make people upset without thinking that feedback is really a gift. So there are ways of giving very, very good feedback to enable people to know where they should focus and what they should be doing differently if there is something that they should be doing differently.
I love that you said that. I love that you said feedback is a gift. It's so critically important, and people aren't necessarily the best at that. Antonio, from an inside of the business perspective, growing a company to the size that you were able to get your company to with so many different employees, what were the biggest pitfalls that you faced, or even peers of yours, other companies that faced, that you feel like other founders in your position should know about?
There's a couple of things. One being that it's very important, and I'm piggybacking off Karina's comment here, but the profile of the team that you had when you were a startup changes and needs to change as you turn into a scale-up. And you kind of have people that do many things, as Karina said, and we're all generalists. And you start recruiting more specialists, people that go narrower but deeper. And that's a blessing because you're able to build a team with more technical people or specialized HR people that you didn't have the luxury of having before, but being very aware that profile is going to change and should change and has to change. It's very important in that self-awareness of the entrepreneur and understanding how the profile of the people that we're bringing in not necessarily looks exactly the same as the people that we already have. A second one that I feel it's very important for us entrepreneurs is that at that stage, when you're going from startup to scale up, you may be seeing positive numbers for the first time. And it takes a lot of discipline to take that EBITDA and reinvest it in the company and reinvest it in people. And it's key. It's what will take you to the next level. But it's easier said than done. And from experience, you've been losing money for a long time. All of a sudden, you see the numbers rolling in positively and taking that money and putting it right back into the business and investing in the team that you need to build the business of tomorrow. It's hard, but it's super important. Also, it's hard to recruit. You're a small company still. You have a big vision. You know where you're going, but you need to be able to sell that vision in order to build the team that will take you there. And I think that's a key skill set for founders and CEOs in order to be able to build that team, is to be able to sell that vision. And last but not least, as you bring in more talent into the company, I think it's very important to engineer and design that org structure so you're able to leverage all that firepower. It's very easy to be very inefficient about the talent that you bring in, and the org chart needs to change in order for that talent to be empowered and to perform to its full potential. And I think that's very important and very different from a startup to a scale up.
Really interesting, and a lot of similar themes. One question that keeps coming up that I want to hear from both of you is, when do you grow your talent on the inside and when do you look on the outside? How do you know that you have the right person that needs a little love, a little nurturing, and how do you know that it's time to look outside?
Good question. And I think it comes down to this organizational focus and discipline that Antonio is talking, and I was talking a little bit. At the beginning, you have people that are doing many different things, and it's hard to assess whether they're right or wrong because you're just spreading them very, very wide in very, very different angles. Once you start asking your people to go deeper, and then you try to look for specialists. I really truly believe to ensuring that there is a clarity around objectives, and you don't need to go to any OKRs, and you don't need to have necessary systems that are going to to track, because these objectives are changing daily. You're a very agile organization, and you need to build agile culture, but at the same time, people need to have clarity around what's expected to them, how they contribute to bigger companies' goals, and then giving them feedback if they are not performing. And once you have clarity around day-to-day objectives, it is easier for you to track whether they are doing a good job or not. Then another thing is what you are going to do with the talent that's not necessarily performing. And there are many different things. You either can see, did I hire the right person to do that job? Or is that still my generalist that I'm asking to do very, very specialized, narrow type of role? And once you know that you have a specialist that is not doing good job, I think this type of decision should be made sooner rather than later. Once you have generalist who is doing a specific role, I think it comes down to really observing potential. Am I asking for something that can be coached and trained? Is that something that I need to expose to a mentor? Maybe there is a little bit someone who is more senior who could coach this type of person. Maybe there are some classes online that I could send to and some training. Or perhaps this person is a very natural leader and great culture fit. So, should I complement this person with somebody who can report to this specific person and is specialist? So really looking at the talent holistically in terms of what's the potential, what's the role, how I communicate about the role, and then how that person is performing. But you need to stay very, very close and observe that. And it comes, and everything starts around the clarity around what individuals should be doing with this agility around this, that, not set in stone for the next 12 months. It might be changing once a quarter, and let's just regularly reevaluate.
That's great.
I totally agree, and I'll add one more layer. And I think it's very important when we're building a team. People join a startup team because they're looking for outsized growth opportunities. So we tend to like to promote from within. At least we do. That being said, we need to be very disciplined and truthful to ourselves as to whether what we're asking of that person, it's, as Karina said, coachable and teachable, or is it just beyond their natural skill set, and that's fine, right? A great salesman is not necessarily a great commercial manager, and we have to be very careful because otherwise we can really hinder the progress of our own team. Trying to do them a favor, we can put them in a position to fail, and we have to be very cognizant of our team, their capacities, and actually empower them and position them to succeed. If we, as leaders, can do that, I think we can have grow as a team, as professionals, and as a company at the same time.
That's great. and thinking about, supporting within, but to Karina's point, knowing when it's time to look outside. Now, I want to put on a hat from the Endeavor perspective, because as you both know, we work with a lot of companies in middle America and in obviously across the world, but often in our states and our region here. It's in areas that don't have a ton of resources. And they also often don't have many companies that have reached that growth and scale stage. So going back to when I'm going from, earlier stage companies to scale and kind of becoming a scale up, if I don't have many CFOs or COOs or, heads of people who have taken companies to that growth, what are some creative ways that you've seen for people to source the right people on their teams to help them get to that level? That's question number one. And question number two is, what resources exist that you guys have seen that can really help founders of growth stage companies really move the needle on their teams?
Another very good question. And many of these things I observed in Silicon Valley with founders and companies that at the beginning were not able to raise big capital, together with with companies that scaling in different geographies, with the aspect of I spent almost 6 years working for a nonprofit organization with operations in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia. So I think there are a few themes. Number one is there is just so many resources out there, around mentorship, around you can listen to different podcasts, look at different tech talks. There are just so many great speakers, read many articles, read many different books. So if you see that somebody is very coachable and has potential, I think there is just lots of resources out there that can be really direct to specific person needs. Then yet, if you need a CFO and you don't have anyone with finance background, that's an issue. I might not be thinking of hiring a CFO, but you might want to hire manager of finance or somebody who has very, very good financial education. So I would be very, very careful. Or not everybody can learn from the podcast how to do engineering, right? So you need to be very, very careful around that. Mm-hmm. Number two, there are many mentors and coaches out there who would love to give back and then want to mentor and coach people around. But I think back to your first question, it is very, very key in this smaller startup, look not only for experience of the people and EQ, but also IQ, and them understanding what are the things that I know and what are the things that I don't know, and find for the people who are hungry of knowledge, hungry of surrounding themselves with people who experience, growing the community around them, asking people from another startups to tell them how they've done this and how they experience, being humble and being, actually, I don't know, but I'm going to do everything to find the answers. And these are the individuals that are, growing within the companies very, very quickly, rather than them thinking that they know anything and everything, and not being humble to say, oh, actually I don't know, but I will do regardless. So I think this is back to hiring the right people, even if they don't necessarily have don't fit all the criteria that you are looking for, that they have this EQ aspect, that they're going to be humble enough to surround themselves with the right mentors, talent, and knowledge.
I actually sat on a mentorship call between you and one of our great companies, and you had said something very similar that resonated with me. It was, look for the hungry people in that line of work who might not already be at the level that you're hiring for, but are one step behind, who are really smart, really bright, really hungry. That's something that's really stuck with me. Antonio, for you, kind of having been on the inside, what were creative ways that you sourced top talent, or what were resources that you used that you felt like really moved the needle when you were building your team?
There's a couple of things. And I think one key strategy is what you just mentioned, hiring people that can step up to the challenge. They might be in big corporations, but might be relegated to a second or third string because they're young and they're in a public company, but they can really step up in a smaller company to do the work. For us, we have a couple other strategies. One Being in Puerto Rico, which is a small market, it's hard to recruit the talent that we're looking for. We've tapped the diaspora. So there's a lot of people living outside of Puerto Rico that want to return to the island, that want to return, but with the right opportunity. And we've brought in a lot of our team has actually come in from the States, from Silicon Valley to work in Puerto Rico with Connect, just because we were able to create the right opportunity for them. And second, and we've done this more aggressively recently, we've stopped thinking as Puerto Rico as our labor market. We want to compete on a global scale. We can recruit globally. And today, part of our management team, including I'm currently the CEO of the company. We just hired a president, and he's based off San Jose, Costa Rica. So that works. We've been working through Google Meets for the whole year anyway, right? And we've stopped thinking about Puerto Rico as our only source of talent. And again, if we want to compete in a global market, we have to tap into the global marketplace of talent to build a global caliber team.
And that's amazing how COVID changed this perspective of really hiring talent globally. And you have more and more people who would love to work for organization that is in Puerto Rico, by being in Eastern Europe, for example, right? So, so you truly can, but you just need to be, to Antonio's mind, like really open-minded, and then thinking, what type of culture do I want to build if I'm going to be fully remote organization?
I think it would be almost a downfall of this conversation if we didn't actually talk a little bit about the effects of the pandemic and how that's going to affect building high-quality teams. What do you see? What are you hearing? What are you feeling when it comes to founders in terms of their challenges now building high-performing leadership teams, but teams in general when so many people are remote?
Antonio, do you want to start this time?
Sure. I think for me, culture has taken a more protagonistic role in how we build teams. I think the tools are there to work remotely effectively, but we like to talk internally a lot about the social fiber. So if we've been working together for 5 years and then we have to work remotely, our relationship is going to be very seamless. It's going to work because we have a lot of context. When we start relationships remotely, we have to build that context, and that context won't be built on the water cooler. That context has to be built by design. We have to create the spaces to create that social fiber and to inject that culture into a team or into a company that has never been to an office. So we have to be a lot more purposeful in how we create and propagate our culture, right? So again, I think teams can be very effective remotely, but we have to think a lot more and a lot harder, invest a lot more in how we create that social fiber and how do we scale culture when we're not, 8 feet away and having lunch together every other day.
That's the key question. And Karina, from your point of view, when you're seeing so many different portfolio companies navigating this discussion of whether we're going to be in person, whether we're going to be hybrid, whether we're going to be fully remote, how are you seeing performance being affected by their decision making, or is it even too early to be able to tell on that side?
Yes, I think it is too early, but I think companies have to think about what type of culture do they want to build, depending of what type of decisions they are making, whether fully remote, hybrid, and to the office. And each of this option creates different challenges and opportunities. And each of this option is going to create a little bit different approach and strategy. But I think there are a few teams that are very key for all of these options. And I think the communication is the most critical right now, and almost over communication, especially when you're building the remote environment, especially when you have people in very different locations or working from home. You don't see them in the office, you cannot talk to them. So for them to feeling connected, for them to hearing the vision, the strategy, the direction that we are going, how that cascade down through the organization, what this means for sales, for engineering, for product, for operations, how they contribute to that vision, giving that feedback. So over communicate, and if that communication is not good within the leadership team, and if you don't train your leadership team how to pass down the information, That's bad. And I think it is very critical to think about communication top down, but also communication bottom up, and organizing town halls, organizing team meetings where you're giving the voice of the employees, that they can ask questions, doing different employee surveys. That's one. Second, I think training managers, globally, diversity, speaking very differently. You're not talking only about the diversity of gender and race. You start talking about different backgrounds with different education, that came from different environments, that they used to receive differently feedback, or their goals were communicated very differently. And I think the role of HR has changed a lot. HR that can train the first-time managers who've never managed remotely or never managed people who are, come from different backgrounds is very, very key, which translates into onboarding. I think it is very different to manage people who've been in the organization for the last 5 years and you know them because you used to sit with them in one office, versus you're hiring people that you never met face to face and they never met you. And also it's very differently if you're hiring senior people versus you're hiring young people who do need this mentorship and they want to have colleagues at work and they want to hear the feedback from their managers. So I think the HR role has changed, leadership role has changed, and communication is very, very key.
You talked a little bit about when you're a small team and you've had people around who have been 5 years, you know them, they're like your family, right? When you're a small group, you're a startup phase, everybody knows everybody kind of inside and out, and that's kind of the family culture that you establish. You both have hit on culture multiple times in this conversation. When you think about, again, going from that startup to scale up phase and the importance of culture, how do you keep that closeness? I guess, should you keep that closeness, that family type of closeness? And really, what are the most important pieces of setting a culture so that it can be exciting, it could allow people to thrive, and you can really perform to get the company to the next level?
Antonio?
Sure. So you were saying, obviously, when we start as a small company, you go through a lot of stuff together. There's a certain camaraderie and friendship that develops among people that have been through those tough times together. That's very natural. And one that's amazing too, it's very important to manage it as the team grows and newcomers come in, because it's very easy for that system to resist or create antibodies to new people, especially in leadership roles, right? So these people have been used to running the company. Now there's new peers coming in, maybe new bosses coming in, and it's very natural for antibodies to be created. But I feel like those people that have been with you through a lot, if they're the right people and they want to be there for the next phase and they understand the vision, they also understand that new people are necessary in order to get to that next level, because you won't be able to do it by yourself. And given that we're going to recruit, then who do we recruit becomes the main thing, right? It has to be known, or we have to be aware that the culture that we have today, we have created ourselves, but the culture that we'll have tomorrow will be impacted by these new recruits. And when we understand that, we have to be very genuine. We have to create a culture that's genuine, right? That we don't have to, that it's very organic, that feels very natural, that we can embrace and live by every day. We have to create a culture that empowers our people to develop their skills and grow in their areas of expertise. And develop a culture that is strong enough and transparent enough and clear enough as to where if you were to hire the wrong person, that same culture will kind of, I want to say, expel the wrong recruits as well, right? And it serves like a defense system a little bit for the company that you want to build. And what happens is one of two things. If the culture is strong and vibrant, people that come in that don't fit that culture and are not going to push that culture to the next level will be out the door quickly. If it's not strong, then it's even worse, because that newcomer might take the culture be able to dominate that culture and take it in the wrong direction. So again, that feeling of family will continue to exist. I think it changes and evolves through time as the team grows, and hiring the right people that fit the culture and understanding who you are and who you want to be. It's what makes or breaks if that team can scale to the next level and continue to feel that sense of belonging that has taken them this far.
What I would add, and well said, Antonio, what I would add is culture is changing and will be changing. Like there might be this feel of family and friends, but when you're 20 or 50 people and you have access to your CEO and you're in the room for every single conversation, that's not going to be the truth when you're 200 or 500 people. And by the way, the people who work close to CEO might not be the first layer of the leadership team. You might decide that you're going to up-level them with somebody. And I think the people use that culture word, but I think it is very important to really translate this of what's your vision, what are your values, and what are your principles, and how you're using them as you grow and as you change. And your values might not be changing, then yet that feel of the organization might be changing. And if you're using these principles to hire people, to motivate people, to give people feedback, and so you're building that and maintaining the same culture because you're using the same values and the same principles, and the definition of the culture is very, very similar. And I think another thing that many founders make mistake once you start scaling is that they hire strong VP of people, head of HR, and they think that they can delegate culture to these individuals, but culture starts and ends with the leader. And people are going to always look up to the leader. What type of behaviors do they present in front of organization? How this cascades down through their leadership team, and what type of behavior leadership is going to present. And if you're not going to react right away to what type of behaviors are you living up to the values and principles, people are going to look at the leader. So culture can be delegated to HR. Leaders are culture.
Yeah. So I know we're running a little bit out of time, but I want to ask one more question to the two of you. And I think with so many great leaders and founders who are watching today, thinking about if you had one piece of advice or one lesson learned that maybe you learned the hard way, but when it comes to developing, identifying, growing, high-performing teams and leadership teams, what would it be?
I feel that as founders, we have to be, and I'm learning this recently, we have to be in a constant push to make ourselves replaceable. And that doesn't mean that we're going to retire. On the contrary, we need to create the leadership that the company needs to continue to grow and evolve. And at the same time, by making ourselves replaceable, give ourselves the space to develop, learn, and become into the leaders that our company is going to need tomorrow. Because the role of the CEO, as many roles, is going to change throughout the lifetime of the company. When you're an 8-person team, I was the head of IT, head of marketing, head of everything, right? And today, as we turn into a 400-person company, the role that the team needs me to play it's very different. So if I wasn't able to grow my team and teach my team to take my place, I won't be able then to move on into the position that my team would need me to grow into the company that we want to be tomorrow. And that's something that we constantly need to be doing, because that constantly changes. So we have to be constantly teaching and constantly learning and growing towards the company that we know that we can build, and the leaders that we know that we want to be and our company needs us to be.
That's great. Not always an easy thing, I think, for people to recognize, when it's their time to move into a different role. So great piece of advice. Karina, do you have anything you want to share?
Very similar. I would say, don't be afraid. Hire people who know more than you, but be very, very true to in what areas. And it starts with awareness about your weaknesses and around your strength. And really, by the end of the day, and what I tell all the entrepreneurs, you need to sit and be honest with yourselves. What are the things that give you energy every single day? These are your strengths, and that's the gift that you have, and this is where you should be focusing your day to day. And the things that take your energy away, just delegate. Hire people who know more in this area. Don't be afraid to hire people who know more in these areas, and delegate and motivate these individuals, but don't be afraid of losing control. Very often the CEOs, they want to have control about every single aspect and are just spread too thin, especially in the areas that they are not strong. So don't be afraid of like really having enough self-awareness of, okay, I want to focus in these areas and I'm going to find the best people who can complement me in the areas where I don't have strength, and delegate these areas.
Great piece of advice, from culture, from building your team, from looking either within or outside, to kind of knowing when to move on. This was an excellent conversation. We are so thankful for the two of you guys joining us today. I am sure there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of follow-up afterwards, but thank you so much for your time, and we'll continue the discussion.
Thank you, guys. Great being here.